Okay, so it's very important that we talk about cultural appropriation. A lot of people, are becoming more and more concerned that what they do or don't do in magic might or might not be appropriating somebody else's culture. And that's a good thing, because cultural appropriation is bad. Cultural appreciation is good. And I want to explain the difference between those two things really, really quick before I break down what is and is not a closed practice, or something that you shouldn't do unless you're initiated into it or born and raised in the culture. Cultural appropriation is when people just go out and see something that they like of somebody else's culture, someone else's religion, and then just decide that they're going to start practicing it without any kind of understanding or learning or education about it, or talking to, say, a priest who is, officially the person responsible for teaching that tradition, or even performing magic that's calling on somebody else's ancestors. Cultural appreciation means that you are allowed to learn and read and study about anything and everything that you want, okay? Studying and reading and learning about other people's cultures and their practices and their magic and their ancestors is not cultural appreciation. I don't know where that came from today, where people are afraid of, these overly sensitive people are afraid of even learning something about other people's culture for fear that they're going to appropriate it in their mind. Absolutely not. It is absolutely 100% okay to admire people for what they do, for their cultural heritage, for their beliefs, for their practices, to admire it, to applaud it, to encourage it, to positively reinforce that person is doing their own practices, and that's a good thing. And if I'm a magician or a witch, I want to understand what kind of magic other people are practicing. If I can't understand what other people are practicing, I can't defend myself. I also can't help that person if that person needed help. So learning and studying and reading about other people's religions, other people's cultures, other people's ancestors, and other people's magical practices is not cultural appropriation. Cultural appropriation would be like a white person, and we're going to use a white person as an example because it's usually white people that do this kind of spiritual colonization, okay, or go out into the spiritual world and start colonizing it by doing whatever they want to, taking whatever they want to without asking permission and never apologizing for it. Let's say you're a white person and you buy a book written by another white person on shamanism. You get real inspired by what you read, so you go out and you buy yourself a feathered headdress. You buy yourself a drum. You buy yourself a whole bunch of herbs and white sage, and then decide you're going to chant Native American songs while beating that drum, performing a ceremony, or what you perceive to be a Native American ceremony. That's cultural appropriation. That's very, very disrespectful to those people and to those people's spirits, okay? But let me put it in different terms, okay? Terms I think that everybody can understand. Let's use Christianity as an example now. You can't wake up one morning and just decide that you're a Catholic priest, okay? In order to be a Catholic priest, you have to go to seminary school. You have to be trained. There's an entire initiatic process through apostolic succession that happens within the church. You can't just decide that you're Catholic either, okay? Because to be a practitioner of Catholicism or to be Catholic means that you have to be a confirmed Catholic. You have to go to church. You have to go through the initiation to be a member of the Catholic Church, okay? Yeah, if you tried to wake up one morning and go down to the Catholic Church on Sunday and tell everybody that you were there to perform the Eucharist for everybody that day, they would laugh in your fucking face. Because that's not how the real world works. And it doesn't work any differently for any other religion. That includes voodoo, Santeria, Palo Mayombe, Judaism, even Buddhism. There are some religions that are more open than others. As an example, Hinduism is a world religion. It's the third largest world religion. It has no founder. It has many, many, many different scriptures that you can read and study and meditate on to make yourself a better person. There are very clear instructions through many, many sutras that teach you how to sit down and meditate. But once again, that's not really cultural appropriation because of the fact that those teachings are considered universal. They were written by people and they were put out to the public so that everybody could learn them and everything can study them. There's a difference between that and then going and taking an oppressed people's religious practices and trying to practice them. Like hoodoo. I'll give you an example. Hoodoo is spelled Hoodoo, and it is African American slave magic. It is based on ancestral practices that come from Africa. It doesn't come from anywhere else. I'm sorry. People like Catherine Yonderwood and other people who are white, Star Cass and all of those people who say that anyone can practice hoodoo, absolutely not. Now, white people might get really mad at me for saying this, but if you don't have ancestors that were African slaves in the southern parts of the United States, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, and all of these areas, okay? If you do not have the ancestors that actually went through that process, you don't have the right to practice that kind of magic because it's ancestral practices. Now, hold on a second. Are there any exceptions to this concept of like a white person learning something about hoodoo? Okay, like I said, you can read books. You can study and read books and learn everything that you want to read out of books and understand them. But to actually practice the practices, you have to be able to call on the spirits of that tradition or the spirits of those ancestors in order to be able to work that tradition. Let's say that you have a friend who is African American, who practices hoodoo that she learned from her grandmother or she learned from her mother, and she knows that you're a witch and you know that she is a root worker, and she says, come over to my house, let's talk, let's play, let's have coffee, I want to show you some things. And you go over to her house and you start talking about witchcraft or you start talking about hoodoo. Maybe you will find out that she's willing to share certain things about her practice with you, you see? Maybe there is something that you can do that she might give you teachings about, like how to make yourself a spiritual bath or how to clean yourself off. And you can say, is that something that I can do being white? And she could say, yeah, I'm giving you permission. You can make the spiritual bath. My grandmother taught me how to do this. Now I'm going to teach you how to do it. So that is a spiritual gift that you can receive. If there's someone who is in a closed practice that tells you, you can do this because it's not appropriating my culture, then you're okay, okay? Same thing with Native American people. If Native American people invited a white person to come along to a powwow or even do some other kind of ceremony or sit and observe a ceremony, it's a gift and a privilege to be able to be invited by a indigenous culture or by a diasporic practitioner to come along and to observe their practices or even participate in some kind of way. But there's a very big difference besides just reading a book and deciding that you're going to do whatever the fuck you want to do and actually meeting and talking to and working with real practitioners that really, really practice this stuff, that have the ancestral and cultural heritage to practice these things. So a closed practice is either closed because it's ethnically based and it's based on your ethnicity and your ancestors. That means your bloodline, your DNA. Or it's closed because it's initiation based, because it's a religion. So like I just talked about hoodoo, but hoodoo is not voodoo, VOODOO, or VUDU, or VODOU, or Vodun. That is a religion. That is something that someone becomes initiated into because there's a priest or a priestess, a hungan or a mambo, that initiates people into those practices, introduces them to those spirits, connects them with like Legba or Papa Legba or Belie Belcan or any of the deities, Havioso, any of the deities that are part of that particular religion. So anyone can practice religions that are initiation-based, like Santeria, but those are things that you have to go and you have to find a priest, someone who can perform divination, someone who can go before the spiritual world and ask permission from the spirits of that tradition as to whether or not they want you there, whether or not they're willing to work with you, protect you, give you the license to be able to call. It's like getting a driver's license, right? Get a license to be able to call on those spirits when you need them, or when you want to talk to them or pray to them or put an offering out for them or work with them. So, you know, I'm a spiritualist and I practice spiritism, espiritismo, criollo, creolized spiritism, and mediumship that comes off the island of Puerto Rico. Because I'm Puerto Rican on my mom's side of the family, and most all of my practices, like I said, are ancestral and the traditions that I practice come off the island of Puerto Rico, that migrated out of Puerto Rico and into New York and into Florida and other parts of the country. Okay, wherever Puerto Ricans or Cubans have gone and carried those practices, that's the kind of stuff that I do. And those are the initiations I have and the spirits that I call on and work with when I want to work with spirits. So the point of the matter is that in espiritismo, which is straight up spiritualism and straight up spiritism, spiritism is not a religion. Someone who practices spiritism or spiritualism is going to work with the spirits of the dead that come to them. So this is where things get a little tricky, but something you have to understand. If you go to a spiritualist or someone who practices spiritism to find out what spirit guides you have around you, or who your guardian angel is, or how to work with those spirit guides, it might be that you find a creolized medium, even if you're white, that says, oh, well, you have this African spirit, or you might have this indigenous spirit, or you might have this Orisha, or you might have this Loa. But you will learn and you will be trained by a spiritist or a medium in order to petition those particular spirits or work with those spirits in a respectful way. So it's all about respect. It's about cultural appreciation. It's about respect for everyone's beliefs, okay? And recognizing that, it's not appropriate to go and start calling in the spiritual world and pulling on other people's ancestors that are not your own. And we'll talk more about this later, but I hope you have a greater understanding now about what is a closed practice, what is an open practice that anyone can learn because it's been around for a very, very long time, and it's something that you can incorporate into your life for health purposes or for meditative purposes. And then practices that are closed, and ways that you can learn about closed practices and meet people who are in closed practices that might be willing to share their beliefs and their teachings with you.